Hi, and welcome back to my channel. In today's video, you have part one of my November wrap-up. So I decided to split my wrap-up for this month just because the two halves of the month have completely different reading vibes, basically. Because, as you will have seen from several videos that I've posted, I am dedicating the second half of November and the first week or so of December to my Goodreads Choice Awards project. Now, it may last longer in December because I do actually want to completely finish these categories. And if I remember from last year, when I had more series to catch up on, I was still reading some of those books at the end of December at the beach. So I do plan to read all of them. We shall see how long that takes. Okay, so that's the second half. Now I plan to, and these videos will come up obviously after this one, I plan to do like check-in videos where I will rank what I have read, come up with a graphic of some sort to briefly give my opinions because I'm talking about them further in depth in my reading vlogs, and then also rank them. So I wanted to talk about the first half of the month, in which I did set a TBR for that, which I will link either in the cards or down below. And these are books where I did complete them, most of them to fit one or multiple prompts for the Once Upon a Readathon. I have not entered any of those because I realized that you entered them a step at a time and you can't go back steps and still earn points. And I wanted to earn as many as possible. And I knew that I had a possibility, a very large possibility, of being able to get all of the steps if I included the books from the second half of the month. Now, that being said, I am going to talk about my reads in the first half of the month in 3 different parts. We're going to start with audiobooks, then we are going to go to ebooks, which is the second part, and then we'll have physical books, which is the third part. Physical books is the largest. I won't go super in depth on these books because I give a lot of thoughts about a lot of these books in the reading vlogs, which I will link down below. So for audiobooks, I'm going to start with the second to last audiobook that I finished prior to starting my Goodreads Choice Awards project, and that is Empire of Pain by Patrick Radden Keefe. My mom actually just finished this as well. We read the majority of it together as we went down to Hilton Head and then back for a half marathon the second weekend in November. And both of us were struck by the way that Keefe tells the story, and it's both a biography. It's more a biography than an investigative journalism into OxyContin itself. And you really gain a new or different understanding on everything that went down by understanding the family behind it all. And I really enjoyed this book. It ended up with being a 4.5 stars for me. Now, the reason I talked about that one separately is because the other 3 audiobooks that I read in the first half of the month are all part of the Realms of the Elderling series. I started off with finishing The Rainwild Chronicles and Blood of Dragons. I have physical copies of the Fist and the Fool trilogy on their way to me. They have not arrived yet. So I'm going to use this as my stand-in for my Realm of the Elderlings books. Out of all of the 5 series in Realm of the Elderlings, this is my least favorite. That being said, I still absolutely wholeheartedly love Realm of the Elderlings. It's one of my favorite fantasy worlds, hands down. Robin Hobb is an amazing writer. Out of all of the Rainwild Chronicles books, I think this would be my 3rd favorite. And then Dragon Keeper would be 4th, but I think they're both kind of tied for 1st. Now, Dragon Keeper is, I just tried to say 4th and 3rd at the same time. They're both tied for 3rd. Dragon Keeper is the first book in the series. Blood of Dragons is the second book in the series. But they struggle for different reasons. I won't talk much about Dragon Keeper because I talked about that in October. Blood of Dragons, I just think she had so many perspectives that none of them got the wrap-up that they deserved. All of the information talked about in here is so important, especially when you go into the Fist and the Fool trilogy. I found myself taken aback by just how much I loved Fool's Assassin. because so much of that story is so character focused. There's hardly any plot at all throughout the first part of the book, but you need it. And the only way that that works is if you have all of the character investments that come before that. But it just strikes so deep. And even with the fact that you have all the the build up and the investment from the previous books, Robin Hobbs still continues her masterful character work, because I found what I think is my favorite Realm of the Elderlings characters in this book. And another one that I absolutely loved that unfortunately is in just this book, in Realm of the Elderlings. It was so good. And then we come to Fool's Quest. I believe that's the second one. There, obviously the plot ramps up. So many things are unfolding, and it's just such a beautiful and heartbreaking weaving together of all of these different plots and threads and things coming together, even with the introduction of new villains that had only been alluded to before. I just think I don't ever recall reading from an author who does character work better. You both hate some characters, adore some characters, get annoyed at characters, have real human visceral responses to fictional people. It's amazing. That means I have one book left in the Realm of the Elderling series. I have set it aside until after my Goodreads project is done, because I'm listening to a lot of audiobooks to get through that project. And also, it's the last one. So, and I know that there's stuff in there that just packs an emotional gut punch. So I'm saving that for later. I read 2 ebooks in the first half of the month, and those were both NetGalley arcs. The first of those was Solito by Javier Zamora, and it turns out that was also on the Goodreads Choice Award list for memoirs, not a category that I plan to finish. Solito is a book that I read in one sitting to get page numbers in, and I think I would have had a hard time coming back to it if I tried to read it over multiple days, just because in this book, Javier Zamora is telling the no holds bar, no sanitize, it's the brutal reality of what he went through as a 9-year-old traveling from El Salvador to the United States. The reality of this and what he had to go through as a 9-year-old is just heartbreaking, and it definitely packs a punch. I hope it goes on to at least the semifinal round or the finalist round in the Goodreads Choice Awards in the memoir category. We all know it can't win because it's up against I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. The other book that I read was Momo Arashima, Steals the Sword of the Wind. This was an unexpected hit for me. I had not originally planned to read this book, but I couldn't access the one I had planned because it was one of those that I couldn't read on the Kindle. Momo Arashima, it seems like it would perfectly fit the Rick Riordan imprints. It's not a Rick Riordan imprint, and in a lot of cases, it does the job better than most of the other books in his imprint and some of Uncle Rick's books himself. I loved both the realness of both Momo and her friend, whose name I've forgotten at the moment. I'm not great with names, but they seemed like 7th graders. They seemed like middle schoolers, and their motivations and the way that they handled things, very realistic. But also the fantastical aspect of it, hands down, phenomenal. I loved it, and I loved the writing, and I loved the way that the author wove in Japanese mythology. Well done. Both Solito and Momo Arashima were also 4.5 reads. Now we have the physical books that I read in the month. And then we will start with Darius the Great Is Not Okay. Technically, this is an October read, because with this book, I finished my October TBR, which I feel great about. But I finished it on October 31st, and I had already filmed the wrap-up for October. I did not expect to love this book as much as I did. It may make its way onto my top 10. Haven't decided yet. This, again, also is character exploration. The plot behind it, that's not what's important in this book. In this book, it's an exploration of Darius, his mental health, his finding his own identity in being half Persian, half, I guess, what he calls Teutonic after his father, and learning how to deal with that and the culture of going back to Iran. I'm going more in depth in this than I should because I've talked a lot about this in those reading blogs that I mentioned, but hands down, this is a 5-star read. Next, we have Ace of Spades, and this was my first November read. It took me 2 days to finish. Not too shabby, especially since both of those days were work days. And in this book, this is more of a mystery. I wouldn't say it's a thriller, but there's more of a mystery, a little bit of a thriller, a little bit of dark academia because it takes place at the school, but it's a high school. I just felt that the villainy behind it, while dealing with a very real topic, was a bit too heavy-handed, especially the unveiling at the end. So it did bring it down a little bit for me. I think this ended up as a low 4 stars. Once again, we have a 4.5-star read. I had a lot of those this month, and this is Tristan Strong Destroys the World. This is the second or middle book in the Tristan Strong trilogy. I have not read a middle grade book as good as the first book in this series, hands down. This book, I think what brought it down just a little bit was it didn't have the same gut punch of the reveal of the villain that the first book had. And this book couldn't because the villain had already been revealed in the first one. But Kwame and Balia, it moves slow throughout the first parts of the book. And then the way that he brings it together at the end, it makes the investment earlier in the book so worth it and so absolutely incredible. I love these books and I cannot wait to get to the third one. Next, we have a novella, and that is Edge Dancer. Edge Dancer is a novella that takes place in between Words of Radiance and Oathbringer and stars Lift, who you first encounter in one of the interludes in Words of Radiance. And as soon as I read Lift's interlude, I knew I loved that character. And you got only the one interlude. And so everybody clearly wanted more. And Lift plays more of an active, albeit who on earth is this kid, role in Oathbringer. But this is just an incredible story. I loved it so much. I love Lift. I love the way that Sanderson advanced the plot in this novella. It's really important to read this novella, while at the same time giving Lift her own story and introducing more questions. If you want to know all about Lift, will you find it in this book? No. You'll just find more questions and want more. But I recommend this book. This was a 4.5 stars. Next, we have a book that I finished towards the beginning of the month, and that is Antes de Ser Libres. This I really want to read in English because while I caught a lot of the power of the story that Julia Alvarez is telling in this book, I know that I missed a lot of it because Spanish is my second language. This tells the story of a family caught up in a revolution in, I believe, 1961 in the Dominican Republic, in which the U.S. had quite a part in it that they don't really acknowledge. So I enjoyed this book, but I want to read it in English as well. Next, we have Beasts of Prey by Ayanna Gray, and I found myself enjoying this book a lot more than I expected to, just because, you know, YA fantasy, I've been let down by some like this before, and I've seen a lot like this. But the thing is, Ayanna Gray does not disappoint. I love the fact that we went back and forth between these two perspectives, but also we got a third perspective that I knew was not in the same time zone, basically, of these two main characters. And then when it's revealed, you know, I can't say anything else, you know, spoilers, packs such a punch, and it reads so quickly, and it's really powerful. I really enjoyed it. 4.5 star reads. I'm so glad I have the sequel. Then we have the chunker of the first half of the month, Oathbringer. So I still prefer Words of Radiance to Oathbringer. And I also, if I were to rank my Cosmere novels so far, Words of Radiance is number 1. Bands of Mourning from Miss Born Here 2 is number 2. And then number 3 is Oathbringer. And I think it suffered, because, I've read some other reviews of it, and I think it was Petrick, who said that it was missing more perspectives from Kaladin. And things didn't really start getting going with Kaladin until around page 600. But this really is Dalinar's book. There's a lot of investment that you have to make. But when getting through this book and the backstory and the things he's revealing, and it challenges your knowledge of who Dalinar is, because you don't know any of his backstories, only allusions in the previous books. But it challenges and you're like, wait, who is Dalinar really? But then when the reveal comes in like the last 150 pages, everything makes so much sense and it's so powerful. I stand by the fact that what I love about Sanderson's writing is his intricate plotting. Nothing is out of place. Everything has a reason, and when it comes together, it's such a payoff. So, highly enjoyed this one. I won't be getting to Rhythm of War until probably the second half of December though. But when I read Rhythm of War, I will have read almost all of Sanderson's backlist, at least all that I plan to read of his backlist. So I'm excited about that. Second to last in the first half of the month, and speaking of Sanderson, we have The Dark Talent. And I didn't talk about this in my reading blog because I think by the time when I finished up, I knew that I would finish this book, but I obviously hadn't gotten to the end. And then obviously wasn't going to put it in the next vlog. The end of this book gets dark, like, you know, the Dark Talent. And the things that happen at the end, you're like, what did you do here, Sanderson? Like, it still fits. Still a middle grade book. But it's so incredible. I love what he did with that last 2 chapters in here. Absolutely fantastic. And I cannot wait to read the 6th book. I'm glad I went ahead and bought it, even though I have it in hardback because it just came out. I can't imagine having to wait 7 years because I think this was published in 2016. So I'm really excited about being able to get to that one. The last book that I read in the month, unfortunately, was a bit of a dud. And I really hated finishing the month on a bit of a dud. So this is another memoir that I got through Library Thing. And I was intrigued a little bit at first, but I really couldn't figure out what it was supposed to be about. This author, Esther Magnus, is from Germany. So German is her first language, but she's grown up also speaking English. And I don't know whether it was the fact that English is her second language that made some of the writing a little bit different, or it was just her style. I still don't understand the point of the 2 stories that she includes in the first chapter. One of them just seems like, wait, what? What? Why are you telling me this? Because she never really connects it. Her back and forth journey through dealing with her father's battle with cancer during, I believe it was the early 90s, and how she and her siblings dealt with that. It was compelling, but also perplexing because she went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth over the same things. Now, do humans really do that? Yes. However, when you're telling the story and you make it seem like you've come to some sort of aha moment, only to go back on that and to come to that same aha moment again 2 chapters later, and then again another 2 chapters later, it read quickly. I'm glad it was a short book. I finished my TBR that I set at the beginning of the month, but I just felt really blah about this, and so I will not be keeping this arc. Which, it's kind of a sucky way to end this wrap up because, okay, so I had 2 5-star reads. Darius the Great is Not Okay and Oathbringer. So 2 5-star reads. I had what I'm thinking is going to be a 2-star read. So that's the opposite end. And then I had a 3.5-star read. I think I said low 4-star earlier, but I think this was a 3.5-star read. And then literally the rest. So, and I'm also not rating this one because I read it in Spanish. But literally the other books that I read, plus the audiobooks, 4.5-star reads. Like, this is the vast majority I've read in the first half of the month. And almost all of them were 4.5-star reads. Only 2 of them were below a 4-star. I've had a great reading month so far, and I really am excited about that. Thanks so much for watching. I hope to see you in the next one.